Are we good?
Yes, all good. Perfect. All right, we will just start our show right about now. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Nathani. It is our pleasure to have you on Voice of Crypto's podcast and really looking forward to the conversation today. And for all our viewers, I would love to introduce Mr. Shahzad Nathani. He heads partnerships and operations at Shardim. He's a Web3 enabler, he's a technologist and an educator in this space. And we know a lot more about him from in his own words. So, over to you, Mr. Nathani. Can you just give us and our audience a little bit of brief about what you do and what you're currently up to?
First of all, thank you very much for having me here and being here on behalf of Shardium. It's my pleasure to be part of Voice of Crypto and looking forward to have an interesting conversation with you. So, we basically launched Shardium on the 2nd of February 2022. Uh, Shardium is an amalgamation of two individuals who came together for the process of starting a layer one blockchain. One of them is Nishal Shetty, who was the founder of WazirX, co-founder of WazirX, and this is his third startup in this space. And Umar Saeed, who's been a scalable developer, so to say, been in this space since he discovered Bitcoin in 2011. So he's one of those OGs who has spent literally a lifetime in understanding
Hmm.
what blockchain is all about. And in 2015, he realized that when Ethereum launched, Ethereum would not scale, and he basically wanted to create a network which would be scalable and provide a solution to which where he felt would enable a billion users, to come on board on Web3, and that's how he started writing the underlying layer called Shardis. We were
Hmm.
doing a demo on October 22nd, 21st of 2021, and I had sent an invite to Nishchal. Nishchal did attend, and we decided to launch Shardium in February of the upcoming year. So this is where we are. The journey so far has been extremely exciting, and we're looking at onboarding, millions of users as we move forward.
Absolutely. And since when you came up with Stadium till now, I'm sure that the journey has only been onwards and upwards for you, Nishal, and the team. Could you also talk a little bit more about your role at Stadium and what sort of things are you expecting out of the company in the near future?
So my journey with Shardium has been I've been in information technology for over 27 plus years. I started my career with a then startup in India called HCL. So
Right.
it's been a very rewarding journey from then on. My last assignment in the space prior to Shardium was with Lockheed Martin, the makers of F-16, and I spent over a decade with them. But in this particular space, I mean, every day is a learning experience. We meet people from all across the board. As my role of operations as well as partnerships, I do dual role within Shardium. So I manage from the operations standpoint. I look at legal, finance. I look at helping with uh, human resources, and basically most everything which is required from an organization standpoint. And with partnerships, I meet projects who are looking at deploying and porting onto Shardium from other chains. These are new projects. These are projects which are already alive and well. So anything which has been built on EVM, we are ready to work with them and get them onboarded to Shardium. So I meet, this whole bunch of people on a weekly basis, probably 10 to 12 projects. And it's very exciting to meet, people half my age with 10 times my enthusiasm. So it's definitely a learning experience, and I'm humbled to be in this position.
That's amazing. And 27 long years of your career in the IT fintech space. And I'm sure from HCL to Shardium has been a big switch. It's like a switch from Web 2 to Web 3. And when did you exactly realize that this particular technology, Web 3 or blockchain, has the potential? And you thought that you can place your trust in this particular space and finally make the move. So what was that turning point of your career, I'd say?
So my wife and I, we did a startup of our own in the education segment here in the Dallas area, and she's a Montessori educator. So we built 5 schools over a period of time, over a decade. And I was more of on a cruise control mode until Umar one day called me up and said, "Look, I'm planning to scale the project I'm working on, and would you like to be a part of it?" And I said, I let me think about it." And when I saw what he was actually doing, and I started deep delving into the technology, I realized, the potential of this, and I that was a wake up call. So I basically told him I'm more than happy to become a part of the project, and so that's how I joined, this particular project, and it's been a phenomenal journey to say the least. I was there at ETH India last year, and I say this very often, is I've never shaken so many hands in my life, and people were recognizing, just the logo on my shirt, and everybody would come in and say, "You're part of Shardium, yay, this is, we're very excited about the project," and so on. So it's, that was one part of it. Again, I was at Consensus a month and a half back, and again, we saw the same response. I mean, it's just, phenomenal to see the amount of enthusiasm in this space. So very excited and looking forward to launch our mainnet very, very soon.
Wow, wow. I'm sure that your community is equally excited for the mainnet launch. Shadium definitely boasts one of the best privacy setups for their customers, and I think it does brand itself as brand the fact that they boast such a great technology, privacy as one of their USPs. So, while you're doing great in terms of how the company is performing in terms of how you handle user privacy or data, how would you assess the current state of the market in terms of privacy? Let's talk about the crypto blockchain space. How safe is user data, and what sort of challenges do users face when engaging with firms that are present in the Web3 space?
So, like any other nascent industry which is, upcoming, all these there are several challenges which come into play. So, first of all, when you look at the blockchain as a segment, the biggest use case in blockchain has been crypto, right? And fortunately or unfortunately, that has been beleaguered with a lot of people who basically got into the industry to make a quick buck. So there have been several people who have done, things like phishing and scams and rug pulls. But that is not only limited to crypto. You find that across the board. I mean, I still get emails from this lady in Nigeria who wants me to invest 50,000 for that $50 million reward. So it's not just restricted to crypto, but what did happen is that this came into limelight. Um, it got a lot more glare than other industries. So that was the first part of it. Now, second, when you get onto security as in blockchain, I think what we are really looking forward to is, number one, is some form of regulation to come into place. I think that will play a very, very key part. And it was wonderful to see that the Indian government has actually recognized crypto and blockchain by uh,
Yeah.
taxing it. So that was one aspect of it. While people feel that the taxes were high, I think the fact that there was recognition by itself, I think, was a good move. And even in the US, we see a lot of regulations coming down the pike. Initially, obviously, there will be a bit of a setback, as you typically see when any new regulation comes in, especially in a field which considers itself to be totally decentralized. So that is one aspect of it. But regulations will help. And again, with regulations, you will see a lot more streamlining in the security procedures. So we see that to be a very important factor, as it comes into being. Uh, like anything else, I mean, you have to be careful what you do in this space. So typically, most of the transactions are done from, one address to the other. So when that happens, your address is visible to the whole world, right? I mean, unlike what people think that this is an anonymous space, it is not. Whatever transaction you do is available on chain, and it's visible. So when people start reusing their addresses, and people, the scammers start realizing that this is the asset base associated with this address, you become sort of a target, so to say, right?
Yeah.
And that is what people have to be very careful about, about reusing their addresses, etc. again, for businesses, they have to balance between compliance and their business practices to ensure that they are in compliance of what the law of the land is. I think those factors will definitely help us grow the space.
Absolutely. You did mention how the space isn't as anonymous as beginners or people who entered this space thought it would be. And there's a constant rise in blockchain analytics and de anonymization, which a lot of centralized exchanges, a lot of firms are adopting. So, how do individuals who come into this space with a sense of privacy and security manage this or go around it without sort of compromising their securities? I mean, how do users ensure privacy in this space, so to say?
So, I mean, like anything else, let's talk about your bank account, right? I mean, you own your bank account and the account is yours and you have the access points. So, also, when people store their coins on either a centralized exchange or a decentralized exchange or on a hard wallet or cold wallet, uh, if you own the keys, you own the coins, right? I mean, people should never forget that. So, if you give control of your keys to somebody else, you no longer own uh, those coins, those tokens, or whatever assets you have in crypto. I think that is key for people to realize that. You know, so that's the first step of it. The second is try and keep up to date with what's coming in terms of technology, because there is something new coming in every day, which will help you. Either it does two things. One is help you protect you. The second is, people find ways to hack and fish you out. So those are things which one has to be very, very careful about. So being update, looking at what's happening, reading the space, following some good YouTubers who provide you, correct knowledge. I think those are very important aspects of keeping in touch with this industry space.
Hmm. And from an industry point of view, I'm sure that there are a lot of compliances that one has to adhere to, and a lot of governments are in fact trying to implement KYCs, and sort of institutions are trying to comply with that. So, from an industry point of view, how do you strike a balance between these regulatory compliances and preserving user privacy and security?
So KYC is absolutely paramount. I think that is something which we are very, very firm about. I think you have to know who your client, your customer is. That by doing that, you're able to eliminate a lot of issues that come into play. So most of the centralized exchanges or projects, they basically hire third party KYC agents and performers who will basically ensure that there is validation at that end, and that obviously eliminates the AML part of it. So that becomes key, and I think that has nothing to do with privacy here. It is basically to do with whom you're working with, right? I mean, when you sign a contract, you basically have a notary who endorses who the person is, right? So this is pretty much similar, except that it's a slightly deeper process, given the space and what it started with. Because since crypto is the biggest use case for blockchain, and some of the history has been tainted by some of the projects which came on board earlier on. I think it's doubly important that there is a formal KYC process that comes into play. Let's not hide behind the privacy aspect of it, and KYC is KYC. So we have to ensure that you know uh, that is done. Again, we look at not just the individual, but we also look at the data, where it comes about, how it is handled, where it goes, so, and that thankfully in blockchain is visible, so that becomes very easy to deal with.
Absolutely. So of late, a lot of decentralized platforms gained a lot of traction, and I think the last 2 to 3 years have been the time of DApps and DeFi. But there's still quite a few inherent risks or security risks that are associated with new users that new users face when they enter this space. What are the security risks that we as a sector need to sort of battle, and what are the risks that beginners in this space could sort of face?
So the last bull run was, predominantly driven by decentralized finance, right? And I think DeFi played a very, very major role, in basically showing the prominence of blockchain as a market segment. But there are several other use cases which are coming into play. So anything which basically requires or derives a P2P transaction, I think will find its way onto blockchain. Also,
Mm,
we have seen a lot of interest in NFTs, which happened in the last few years. So NFT was again a predominant player. What most people forgot is that NFT by itself is not a use case, but what is behind NFT. I mean, there has to be a revenue driver, right? I mean, there's only
yeah,
so many happy chimps and baboons we can
cryptocurrencies.
see,
Yeah,
but what we now seeing is in terms of NFT, we're seeing fractionalized ownership of real estate. So,
yeah,
which is basically a use case, derived on NFTs, where you could actually own a part of a large building complex, or an apartment building, where you own a $10 or $15 or a 100 rupee component of that. And that basically, you'll start seeing a lot of these come into play. Also, you've got gaming, which is going to be huge in blockchain, and especially with Shardium, we basically have a high transactions per second and a low cost per
mm,
transaction, which makes it extremely favorable for projects such as that. So, going back to your point, is this something which is going to find a prominence? DeFi will remain, and we definitely want to see a lot of payment networks come onto Shardium. So that's going to be a huge space as well. The
mm,
biggest constraining factor in this industry was the speed of the network and the number of transactions you could carry. But with Chardium, I think we are going to break that glass ceiling, and we're going to see a lot more projects at that end come on board.
mm. From a regulatory point of view, Mr. Nathani, there is a lot happening across the globe. Different governments trying to come up with different set of rules and regulations. There's a lot of friction in the United States per se between the US SEC and quite a few centralized exchanges, some of the major players in this space. How is it going to reflect in the larger narrative? And what do you think? How do you envision a future in terms of the regulatory aspects for cryptocurrencies?
I wish I had a crystal ball to be able to predict, but my guess is as good as yours. But what we definitely want to see from a long term perspective is helpful regulation. So I
Mm,
think, rather than having a choking regulation, if we had regulations which typically help the industry at large, because this particular segment, if you look at, the early 2000s, when you had the internet boom, come about, we're going to see something very similar. Web3 is definitely going to be something which will grow in terms of scope and size. So regulations which will come in will definitely help. Any regulation, when it comes about, it does have a bit of stigma associated with that, right? But over time, I think it is extremely important for this industry to get regularized, have things in place. Unfortunately, like other industries, we've had our own set of scammers and drug pullers, etc. So, governance is required, regulations are required, and some form of uniformity across the globe would definitely help. So, short term, yes, there will be some pain,
mm,
no doubt about it. But in the long term, I think it'll only help us.
absolutely. And if you did mention quite a bit about NFTs and how initially the usability around NFTs or the use cases weren't as specific, but now we are seeing a lot of use cases around NFTs. Do you think that would sustain, or as mainstream media reports, NFTs aren't here to stay for a long time and would eventually sort of bite the dust? Do you think that the NFT market sector has some sort of potential in the long run, or would it be one of those asset classes that would be forgotten in the pages of history?
I don't think NFT is gone or will go away. I think
Mhm.
what will happen is it will evolve into something which becomes a revenue driver, right? So instead of just having an idea, instead of just having a very nice looking picture, which is converted into an NFT, and that becomes a collectible, you will have something behind that. So you will start seeing a value not just of the NFT itself, but what it does for you, right? So, for example, I was talking to one of the projects earlier last week. They are basically building a travel platform, and in order to become part of the travel platform, you have to buy one of their NFTs. What it does is it basically gets you, so to say, the front of the line seats, right? So you have a privilege of getting advantages what other people would not. So that's one aspect of it. Secondly, if you do cancel your ticket, that gets moved onto your NFT. You don't lose the money. So, and that becomes tradable. So if somebody is flying on a particular flight who wants to acquire that ticket which you have, that becomes tradable. So there are these use cases which are coming on board, which is not just a picture or a fancy graphic, but there is something behind it, right? So if you have had one of these major credit cards, they give you a front of the line things, advantages. So you'll start seeing a lot more of that, which basically give value to people who own a particular NFT. And anything which is a revenue driver, anything that helps people make money or save money, will definitely sustain and survive. So they will have to morph from the current state of just being pretty pictures onto something which is more of a revenue driver.
um, Very well made points out there. And I think what I want to address is a lot of people say that, I mean, this is the mainstream narrative that a lot of entrepreneurs or a lot of businesses in the crypto space, in the Web3 space, are just noise. And they aren't chasing solutions, they're chasing problems. But how does, from an entrepreneur point of view, how does someone like you differentiate between noise and something that is actually here to stay? What do entrepreneurs see in projects when they have to invest in them? And how did you sort of see potential in projects when you entered the space?
So again, going back to my point, most people, build on a dream, right? And which is phenomenal. We all start with a dream. So that's one aspect of it. But what is behind the dream also becomes, extremely important. Does the dream have enough legs to be able to walk the distance which is required? Secondly, will it have money eventually? Will it become easy to monetize and be able to create enough revenue to be able to sustain and survive, right? So most people start looking at a dream by itself, and they forget that there are bills to get paid. So the minute you start realizing that there is a reality check here, that yes, will I be able to sustain and be able to drive this over a period of time? That by itself is an eye opener. So that's the first thing most entrepreneurs would look at while investing on a project. That eventually, does this sustain itself? That's one aspect of it. The second is the time to sustenance. I mean, if it is something which will take a decade, nobody's really interested. But if it takes a matter of weeks, months, and a couple of years, you will definitely find people who are willing to back you on that project. So that's one aspect of looking at, and that is not just in the Web3 space, but it's also across the board. Where the third thing I would recommend people to avoid is do a me too. So don't be a copycat. Be something original. Find something where you have a definite differentiator to be able to focus on and to be able to provide. So once you start showing that yes, I am this, but I have these are my positives, and this is where I can actually make a difference. So those are things which will definitely survive and grow.
Absolutely. If there are a couple of pieces of advice that you have to give young entrepreneurs, because if you look at LinkedIn, almost everyone has building in Web3 in their profiles, or are educators, or are building new projects. What would be the most important pieces of advice that you would give young entrepreneurs who are trying to build in the Web3 space?
So the first thing is, keep dreaming. I think that's extremely important. Keep thinking, keep innovating. So keep building. That's the first aspect of it. But the second aspect of it, definitely look at how you can monetize your dream, how you can find money, not for yourself, but even your investors. Once you get to a building stage, that's extremely important. And the third is, look for something where you have that edge over others. I think these are, primary factors which come into play.
Couldn't agree more. My last and final question to you, Mr. Nathani, would be around a topic that has been widely discussed and is still being discussed in media: AI. We saw an NFT boom, we saw the crypto craze, and finally, we are in the era of the so called AI craze or boom. And do you see a potential in this technology? And do you also see potentials in both the technologies, blockchain and AI combined? If so, what would they be, and what are your views on them?
I think AI would probably prove to be one of the biggest inventions, if not of this decade, but probably for the century. I think there is definite upside. People are talking about downside, but the way we look at it is, how will it help us get better? So we have implemented some AI techniques within our development process, as well as some of the other processes we use within Shardium, and the results have been phenomenal. So to say that when you're doing some testing, when you're doing some development, when you're looking at compressing code, I mean, AI definitely lends a very very huge step in the right direction. So that's one aspect of it. Obviously, like most technologies, there is the upside and there's the downside. You have a lot of doomsayers who are saying that AI is here to replace us. Well, I don't think that's going to happen in the short term, at least. I don't see that happening over the next decade or two.
Mm,
But it's a self-learning mechanism, so that is the biggest differentiator between AI and others. And once it starts gaining knowledge, and once it starts becoming, more relevant by
mm,
itself, I think it's going to be a fabulous tool to have, to be able to use and grow from. And as in other industries, I think it will definitely lend itself to blockchain as well, and you will see a lot of integration come about. I think this technology is here to stay.
mm. You already mentioned that Chardium is sort of implementing AI in a lot of its development processes. Is there anything that viewers should be expecting from Chardium in this year? Any big reveals that you would like to make, or at least hint at right now?
Well, the biggest reveal for us would be, launching our mainnet. So that's what we are really focused towards. But yes, there would be some integrations, which it's a little too early to talk about, but you will start seeing that in the next quarter or so. And I think, we're really excited about the integration process. We are looking forward to launch our mainnet and get Shardium to the global users, and ensure that the development which is happening can only grow, in this space. So
Absolutely, and wishing you and the entire team of Sharjam all the very best for the mainnet launch. We will have our eyes on it, and hopefully, users and viewers will keep a keen watch on Sharjam. And thank you so much, Mr. Nathani, for joining us today. Some really great points were made, and some very interesting insights. Definitely a lot to take for young entrepreneurs, for people like me as well. So, thanks again for your wise words, and hoping to get you back on the podcast sometime soon, maybe after the mainnet launch.
sure, thank you very much for having me here, and I really appreciated you taking the time. So thanks
The
again.
pleasure was ours. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
this is it in today's podcast. We'll see you next Wednesday with another interesting guest. Until then, bye bye. Keep following Voice of Crypto, and do give a like to Shadia and Mr. Shahzad Nathani. Thanks again for joining us,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.